What's up, model makers? It is Friday, August the 21st, 2015, and I am here to do a kit review. More specifically, I'm here to do my very first kit review for the Kitmaker network. Now, if you're not familiar with those guys, you can check them out over at kitmaker.com, and they have an unbelievable amount of content. Lots of videos, forums, reviews, articles, all kinds of things on just about everything that you can imagine scale modeling related. I got connected with them recently through my buddy Andy Firth, who is also known to you guys as Central Industrial Art Modeling, and he's a fantastic builder, and he seemed to think that I might have something to contribute at Kitmaker, and so he connected me with those guys. And I don't know about contribute, but we'll find out. Hopefully, I won't embarrass him, with this project. Anyway, I did get connected with those guys, and a couple of days ago, several large boxes showed up on my doorstep that had a couple of very exciting things inside. And I'm going to talk about the first one today, which is the Dragon 132nd bf-109-e, which is brand new and looks very cool. It's kit number 3225, and I got to tell you, at first blush, this thing looks pretty impressive, and I'm going to talk a lot about it. What I'm going to do, and hopefully this will prove to be something interesting for you guys. I'm always a little bummed out because even though there's lots and lots of good, sorry about the flies. That's one of the joys of living on a farm in New Mexico in August. Anyway, there's lots of good reviews out there, lots of good unboxing reviews and so forth, but I don't feel like a lot of them really go into depth about how well a kit truly goes together, especially with aircraft, because, I mean, quite frankly, who wants to just build an airplane just for a review without doing any paint? Because that's an awful lot of work, for something that you're not going to be able to finish out in the end. I mean, if you build a tank that way, at least you can put paint on the outside of it and have something to add to your collection. But an aircraft is completely different. So, but I thought it would be cool. Sometimes it's fun to just glue parts together. And so I proposed the idea to Jim Starkweather, who's the honcho at Kitmaker, and he seemed to think it was cool. And I've asked a few other guys if they thought it would be something interesting, and it seems to be. So anyway, we're going to try it at least once. And so what I'm going to do is an unboxing of this thing right here on this video segment. And then in future episodes, I'm basically going to assemble the thing. I'm going to do it by the book. I'm going to do the whole thing, 100%, not leave out any of it. And just going to glue it together with no paint. And just so that I can really, sort of evaluate the fit and the engineering and the overall quality from that standpoint. Now, I can already tell you that that's going to be difficult for me to do because even though the bf-109-e is not my favorite bf-109, this kit is amazing, and the temptation to add some paint and finish it is going to be pretty strong. I can already tell. So there may be some sneaky shenanigans going on along the way so that I can maybe turn this into something real later on. But at any rate, the first thing that we're going to do is an unboxing. But before I tell you what's in the box, let's talk for a minute about what's on the box. Let me get my spectacles so I can more effectively communicate. All right, so there's lots of stuff on the back here, and I'm going to go through some of this that I think is kind of interesting. Movable propeller blades with accurate curved cross-section and true to scale thickness. Now, the movable part is all that's really interesting about that. They apparently have it set up here so that you can adjust the pitch. I guess if you like to display your model airplane with the prop completely feathered, that might be of use to you. Ailerons can be assembled in different positions. Again, ailerons I'm not such a huge fan of because generally when an aircraft is on the ground, the ailerons are level. But flaps, yes, flaps are often drooped, so that's pretty good. Pilot's seatbelt upgraded by photo-etched parts, so you do have some metal in this box. They give you several optional spinners so that you can build a couple of different versions of this. You get all the engine parts, all the gun parts, and you even get some special landing gear compartment parts. I didn't realize this myself until just recently, but the sidewalls of the wheel well on an ME-109 were made of canvas. And they've given you some material in here. I'll talk more about it when I get to it. But it's supposed to be essentially a flexible styrene. Now, why you really want that as opposed to a normally molded styrene part is a little bit beyond me. But it goes to show the level of detail that they've put into this thing. And you can really see that all over the features that they've talked about here. One thing I thought was kind of funny is they mention here on the side of the box a designed crystal clear canopy. I'm glad to know that it's crystal clear. I'm not too sure what it means by designed. Apparently, we've all been building aircraft with canopies that were not designed. Okay, now another thing that I think is really cool that they mention here, slide molded engine cowling cover with maximum detail. Now, the important part about that is slide molded. Now, I've got a mechanical engineering background. I did a lot of work in product development and spent a lot of time in tool shops and talking to tool and die makers. And so even though I'm not as familiar with it as a guy like Martin, the international British modeler, I do know quite a bit about injection molding and injection molds themselves. And I can tell you, slide molding is super cool. What does that mean? All right, I'm going to try and give you a simple illustration using one of my favorite things, which is my little anvil here. If I want to mold this anvil in plastic, basically what I'm going to need to have is a cavity on either side of a mold block that will open this way. And the parting line obviously will be right down the center line of the anvil. And I can get this shape pretty easily by doing that. However, if I want to mold this with these mounting holes included, that's a problem because that creates what's called an undercut. In other words, if the mold is trying to move this way and there's plastic in this area where or there's a piece of steel, a pin in the mold that's going to form this hole, well, that means that when you try to open the mold, you're going to have a disaster, right? You'd basically rip this thing apart, so that won't work. What you have to do in order to create that is you have to have action on the tool. And that comes in the form of what's called either a slide or a lifter. Kind of depends on how it's engineered. I won't bore you with all the details of that. But basically what that means is that you have a pin sticking into the cavity of the mold that retracts either before the mold opens or it does it simultaneously, depending on how it's engineered. Now, that's pretty cool, and it's essential for a lot of components. And but obviously it increases the complexity and therefore the cost of an injection mold by an order of magnitude. Now, if you're going to shoot millions of parts in a tool, that's not such a big deal, right? You're going to amortize the cost of the tool over all those parts. And so if your tool costs $100,000 and you're going to shoot 1 million parts, well, you're going to only incur 10 cents a part as a tooling charge. But if you're only going to shoot a few thousand parts and your tool costs $100,000, that's obviously going to increase the cost that you have to charge for the product by a lot more. And so that can be a challenge for manufacturers of scale models, because one of the major drivers, if not the major driver of the product cost of the kit that you and I buy, is the tooling. Fortunately, tooling is a lot less expensive in China. And maybe unfortunately for American tool and die makers, that's where a lot of molds get made these days. And these guys have started to incorporate slide molds into some of their kits. And from my standpoint as a model maker, I think it's super cool because you can achieve details that previously weren't possible. For example, like I've already looked inside the box with this, and the exhaust manifolds are already molded hollow, and they've used a slide to do that. So that's the kind of thing that you can achieve by using that technology, and I'm expecting good things from this kit as a result of stuff like that. So anyway, I'm not going to bore you anymore with any engineering lessons. I think it's time that we actually go in the box. Okay, so let's get right into this with the instruction sheet. Now, I have always heard that Dragon instructions are a little different, and I can't say that now that I've seen this that I disagree. It starts out pretty standard with a little bit of box art. They give you a nice sprue map on here, which some kit makers don't do, and I think it's a nice feature. Sometimes it's good to be able to sort of look at all the sprues at once. They highlight in blue some parts that you don't need, and I guess unless you're building a different option than the one that is depicted on the box art, so that's also kind of helpful. One thing that they don't have is an actual parts count, which that's not really that helpful. It's just kind of trivia that I'm sometimes interested in knowing. This kit measures out at over 250 parts, though, according to what it says on the front of the box. Okay, now this is kind of how it goes. It is densely packed, as you can see. They give you a pretty good list of paint callouts, which is nice, and they give you good indications of what you're supposed to use and where, and the illustrations are obviously done from the 3D CAD models, so they're nice and crisp. I can't really see anything in looking through these that I can complain about. It's just, it's like I said, it's a little different. I mean, look, this is what you get with this instruction sheet. You get what totals about 8 pages, I guess, if you count each fold of this flyer. And, we may run into some issues with it as I go through the construction, but so far, it's just that it's kind of different. I mean, as a frame of reference, for the Tamiya 132nd Mustang, you get a 35-page booklet, complete with photos, historical reference, and, each illustration in its own separate little section, and there's definitely no doubt about what's supposed to happen in each step. So, it's just a different approach. The Tamiya box is also almost twice as big for the Mustang, and the Tamiya 132nd Mustang costs almost 2.5 times as much. So maybe there's a correlation there. Maybe tooling is not really the driving factor in the price of a model, but it's actually the size of the box. Who knows? Okay, next let's have a look at the decals. These I'm really impressed with. I looked at them through my Optivisor, and I am well pleased with the crispness. All of the text on the placards is legible. These are really nice. There's very little carrier film around the edges of any of them, which is a good thing. And I also like that they have a kind of a satin finish to them, which you can see, hopefully from different angles in the light. Some decals, kind of come with a glossy finish, and it doesn't ultimately matter because it's going to get varnished over probably, but I just sort of like this. They do also appear to be very nice and thin, which of course is a good thing. Now, we won't actually be using the decals in this construction review, but still, I thought it was important to mention those. Okay, let's take a quick look at the photo etch. This stuff is pretty standard, but it is nice. Each fret is numbered, which is good. And if you look at this one, you can see that the detail and the texture on the seat belts looks pretty good, so I'm pleased with that. It's the same thickness as Edward photo etch, but it is definitely a harder temper, and you can see that if you just were to try to bend this. It's a bit springier than the Edward stuff. So for the seat belts in particular, we may find ourselves annealing the photo etch before trying to shape it to help give it a little bit more of a natural drape around the seats. Okay, since we're doing special parts, these are the aforementioned flexible parts that represent the canvas liners of the wheel wells. And you can see they are definitely flexible. And again, I'm not sure what the advantage is there, but I suppose that does speak to the level of passion that the Dragon has put into this kit, and that's never a bad thing. Okay, let's take a look at the clear parts. These are the designed ultra clear canopies that we talked about before, and they look pretty good. The detail is nice. There's rivet detail on the outsides of the frames that looks pretty good. They're they're relatively thin, and the clarity seems to be excellent. However, I did notice, it's probably not going to show up on camera very well, but right there on the left side of that windscreen, there's actually a flaw in the molding. So that's not too good. There is an optional windscreen that has some kind of a port in it, and I'm not exactly sure what that's for. So I'll have to do a little bit of homework on that. Okay, let's just start taking a look at all of the big sprues. Okay, this one gets you all of the, not all, but most of the cockpit pieces. Sorry, I keep bumping the camera. And this is the first look at one of those sections where they take advantage of slide molding that I talked about before. You can see that right here. In order to mold the cutout in this bulkhead right here and not have you make that as two separate pieces, they've got a slide coming in from this direction to do that. And that's pretty cool. Okay, the other thing that you can see on this sprue, hopefully, is how beautifully molded the instrument panel is. I don't think it'll show up on camera, but you know, every one of the needles and hash marks are molded in. Now, that brings up something that I forgot to mention on the decal sheet, which I found pretty shocking, honestly. There are no instrument panel decals other than a few placards, not a dial face one on there. So you better bring your A game if you want to paint this instrument panel effectively. It's molded to help you out with that, but it's still going to be tough. So if you are the kind that prefers to use instrument panel decals for dial faces, you'll have to go aftermarket on that. And you can do that at the same time you order some swastikas, which are also not included on the decal sheet. As we know, some manufacturers choose to forego those for political reasons, I suppose. Okay, not a whole lot to say here. This is just some engine parts. The detail on these motor mount hangers it's just fantastic. Really, really good. Hopefully you can see that where the some of those hoses or whatever they are molded in. Just looks really, really good. Okay, now this is an interesting sprue. It's always one we like because this has engine parts. And this is where I started to notice something that I don't think is bad, but is definitely noticeable. And that is that the detail on everything is really super crisp, but it's a little bolder than what I'm used to, given that I build mostly Tamiya kits. And just to kind of illustrate what I mean, I've got the same sprue from the Tamiya 132nd Mustang, and so this is the Merlin engine, and I'll try and hold this up there where you can see that and see those parts and kind of get an idea of how things like bolt heads and rivet heads and things are sized, and how crisp it is. I mean, if you've ever built Tamiya, you know that's exactly what you get for your money with those guys, and it's fantastic. Now, if you take a look at these parts, I think maybe you'll be able to see what I mean. It's just a little chunkier. The detail is no less crisp, but it's just a little heavier. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that per se. It's just going to create a little bit of a different look to the model, and when you paint everything, and that may be great, but it may be that you prefer the other. That remains to be seen. Okay, another sprue with some landing gear parts. You can see you've even got some brake line moldings on here that look really good. This is also where you really can see that they do a fantastic job of putting the ejector pads somewhere besides in the middle of your parts. And that's something I've noticed throughout all these sprues, and I really like that touch. I'd much rather deal with a clip than a fill of an ejector pin mark. So I appreciate that detail. I also like that they use the standard square peg mount for the top end of the landing gear oleos. The parting line witness mark on these is not too objectionable. There's always a little bit to smooth out with that, but it's not a big deal on these. It's very, very light, and the alignment between both sides of the mold looks to be very good. One thing that I did notice with these parts and quite a few others is that unlike the Tamiya parts that are perfectly smooth, these parts all have a very light texture on them. Now, I don't think that that's really going to show through, so it's not an objectionable thing, and I'm not sure I understand why they do it, but, and maybe this is why they do it, one benefit is that it'll provide a little bit more tooth for your paint, so that's not a bad thing. Okay, this sprue, again, you get an optional instrument panel and some fuel tanks. One of the nice features on the photo-etched part is that you get the strap that goes around this fuel tank as one of the brass parts. Okay, and now we've got a big sprue with wings and things. Really nice detail molded into the insides of the landing gear covers. And another place where we see the slide molding technology, and they've given you they've hollowed the gun barrels for you, so no need to drill those out, and that also is a really nice feature. Definitely appreciate that. Okay, Now we've got some fuselage action. Now, there's not a whole lot to say about this. This is where you see the optional prop tips. One thing that I did notice is, and they mentioned this on the outside of the box, that there are 3 different levels of panel line thickness or depth, whatever you want to call it. And you can definitely see that here. We all know that the Messerschmitt has panel lines on the sides of the fuselage, and these are definitely there. To me, they look a little bit big. You know, again, I don't know that that's going to be objectionable, but it's just a little bit different to what I'm used to with Tamiya, where those panel lines are very thin, even on a 1/32 scale kit. Okay, last sprue. More wing things, but also something that I think is really impressive. There are more cockpit pieces on here, and hopefully you'll be able to see that. If you look right there, part number 15 is one of the roller chains that I believe it controls the aileron trim, maybe. But there's a couple of those that are inside the cockpit of a 109, and the detail on these is it's just fantastic. I'm super impressed that they've included that as a separate piece and that it is so crisp. Also really good detail right here on some of the other cockpit sidewall parts. Just really fantastic. I'm going to have to use a lot of willpower to not give in to the urge to paint all those. Okay, well there you go, guys. That is a quick sprue tour of the new Dragon WingTech 1/32 bf-109-e4 kit number 3225. I say new. I actually did a little bit of homework since I filmed the first section of this review, and it seems that this is probably not a new tool, even though the box says 2015 on it. It appears to be a reboxing of a tool that's probably, I don't know, 3 or 4 years old. But nonetheless, it's very good. I'm really impressed with what's in the box, and you know, I hope that it goes together the way that it looks like it should. You know, I did have a little bit of difficulty finding some pricing information on it. Basically, I had to look on eBay, and it appears that you can get this kit for between 40 and 50 bucks. So, if that's the case, you know, this thing could represent really good value. It's a lot of kit for the money, especially when you compare it to something that costs nearly 3 times as much. You know, whether we like it as much as the Tamiya kit or not remains to be seen. That's kind of my standard. Like I said, it's mostly what I build, and their engineering is just fantastic. So that's part of why I'm doing this as a construction review, because I want to really get into that and see how this thing compares. So hopefully you'll stick with me as I work my way through that, and I'll be able to provide you with some good information, you know, on the way that the thing goes together. All right, guys, if you're still watching, as always, I appreciate it. Much love.